Sometimes the people we trust most leave scars deeper than any enemy could. I thought I understood betrayal when my wife quietly asked for a peaceful divorce, her words calm but her eyes hiding storms. I let her go, believing she wanted freedom, not war. But just 1 month later, fate turned the knife in ways I never imagined, when she saw me standing beside the very man she once thought she could love more than me. That moment shattered illusions, and what unfolded next became a story of justice, irony, and the cruel weight of truth. The quiet unraveling of a marriage never happens overnight. It's a series of small fractures that go unnoticed until the structure gives way, leaving nothing but silence where love once lived. For me, it began in the subtleties: late evenings where she seemed lost in thought, mornings where her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, dinners where conversation became an afterthought. At first, I told myself it was the exhaustion of life weighing us down. Work stress, family obligations, the endless churn of responsibilities. We all go through seasons like that, don't we? But in my heart, I sensed something different. My wife, Emily, had always been a woman of warmth. She had this way of filling a room with her presence, making even the dullest days feel alive. When we first met, I thought I had found the kind of love people spend lifetimes searching for. Yet over time, that warmth became harder to reach, as if it was locked away behind walls I no longer had the key to. The day she asked for a divorce was almost too calm. No shouting, no tears, no accusations. Just a quiet request delivered across the breakfast table, like someone asking to pass the sugar. Her words lingered in the air, chilling the space between us. "I think we should end this peacefully." I remember staring at her, searching for some sign of hesitation, some flicker of the woman who once promised forever. But her face was composed, her voice steady. There was no malice, only resolve. I wanted to fight, to argue, to demand explanations, but instead I sat in silence. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was the realization that fighting for someone who had already let go was like grasping smoke. I nodded slowly, agreeing to her terms of a peaceful separation, though the word felt like a cruel joke. Peaceful for her, maybe. For me, it was the start of a storm. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, lawyers, and the logistics of dividing a life built together. Our home, once filled with laughter and shared memories, turned into a place of negotiation. Which furniture stayed, which books belonged to whom, even the smallest trinkets became tokens of a life being dismantled. Emily carried herself with remarkable composure, almost as if she had rehearsed every step. She avoided unnecessary conflict, maintained polite conversations, and insisted on fairness in every decision. It was as if she wanted to leave no trace of bitterness behind, to part ways with dignity intact. But beneath her calm exterior, I couldn't help but feel the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. Not the betrayal of infidelity, at least not then, but of abandonment. She was walking away from vows, from years of shared struggles and victories, from dreams we once built side by side. And she did it with such quiet finality, as though I were nothing more than a chapter she had outgrown. Friends and family were stunned when they heard the news. Many couldn't believe it, convinced that we had been the perfect couple. Their questions only deepened my confusion. What went wrong? Was there someone else? Hadn't we always seemed so happy? I had no answers to give them, only the hollow admission that I didn't truly know my wife anymore. In the solitude of my new reality, I found myself replaying memories like old films. The night we danced under fairy lights at our wedding, the afternoons we spent building our first home together, the quiet mornings when she would rest her head on my shoulder as we sipped coffee. All of it felt like a cruel illusion now, a story I had believed in while she quietly wrote her own ending. The divorce was finalized with little drama, just signatures on paper and the quiet acknowledgement that we were no longer bound. I expected to feel relief when it was over, but instead, I felt a cavernous emptiness. My life had been reduced to a series of routines: work, eat, sleep, each day blending into the next, stripped of color. And yet, through that emptiness, there was a lingering curiosity, a gnawing question that refused to leave me. Why? Why had she walked away so calmly, so decisively? Why had she chosen peace over passion, silence over confrontation? I searched for answers in her actions, in her carefully chosen words, but the truth remained elusive. It was during this time of quiet reflection that I began to notice subtle signs, threads that hinted at a story I hadn't been told. The way she avoided certain conversations, the strange flicker in her eyes when old names were mentioned, the guardedness that seemed to cloak her whenever the past resurfaced. Emily had an ex-boyfriend before me, someone who had once been a significant part of her life. I had heard fragments of the story over the years, bits and pieces shared casually, but never in detail. She spoke of him with the careful neutrality of someone closing a chapter, yet there was always something unsaid in the way her voice trailed off. I hadn't thought much of it then. After all, everyone has a past. But in the weeks after our divorce, I began to wonder if her past was not as far behind her as I once believed. At first, I dismissed the thought as paranoia born of heartbreak. It was easier to believe she simply wanted freedom than to confront the possibility that her heart had been elsewhere all along. But the pieces began to align in ways I couldn't ignore, and a picture slowly emerged, a picture that would soon change everything I thought I knew about our separation. The weeks after the divorce unfolded like a long corridor with no doors, each day identical to the last. I buried myself in work, convincing myself that productivity could drown the silence. But at night, the questions crept in, whispering into the emptiness of my apartment. I had let her walk away without pressing for answers, and now the uncertainty gnawed at me. It wasn't anger that drove me, it was curiosity. A need to untangle the threads of her decision, to understand the hidden currents that had pulled her away from me. I told myself it was closure I sought, not revenge. But deep down, I knew it was something more primal, the human urge to uncover truth no matter how painful. One evening, while sorting through old boxes I had taken from our house, I stumbled upon a small leather-bound notebook tucked away in a drawer. It wasn't hers, not exactly. It was one she had kept years ago, back when we were first married. Inside were scribbled notes, reflections, and memories. At first, it seemed harmless enough. But then I saw the name appear, written in a way that carried weight, Daniel. Her ex. The entries were not explicit, but they painted fragments of a picture I hadn't seen before. Mentions of old conversations, fleeting what-ifs, the kind of nostalgia that lingers even when people move on. She wrote about how Daniel had once been her anchor, how their relationship had shaped her, and how, even years later, certain memories of him refused to fade. Reading those lines was like swallowing glass. It wasn't proof of betrayal, not in the literal sense. But it suggested something I had never wanted to admit, that perhaps I had always been standing in the shadow of another man. The discovery planted a seed in my mind that grew with each passing day. I began to wonder if Daniel had reappeared in her life, quietly, subtly, during the final months of our marriage. The thought alone made my chest tighten, but it also explained the calmness with which she left. A woman doesn't walk away from years of marriage with such composure unless she has already found a safe harbor elsewhere. Still, suspicion is not truth. I told myself I needed evidence, some confirmation beyond faded ink on yellowing pages. I reached out, carefully, to mutual acquaintances, friends who knew us both, people who might have noticed things I had missed. Most had little to say, offering sympathetic platitudes about how some marriages simply don't last. But one friend, an old college acquaintance of Emily's, hesitated before speaking. "She's been different," they said cautiously. "Happier in a way. I saw her once a few weeks ago. She wasn't alone." The words hit me like a hammer. I pressed for details, but they gave me little more, a vague description of a man tall, with dark hair. Enough to stir suspicion, not enough to confirm it. But in my heart, I already knew. I tried to push the thought aside, but it festered. It invaded my dreams, turning them into restless nights where I replayed every moment of our final months together. The way she avoided eye contact, the careful restraint in her voice, the cold precision with which she dismantled our marriage. It all made sense now. The truth, I realized, had been sitting quietly in the background, waiting for me to notice. Then came the turning point, the moment when speculation hardened into reality. It was a Saturday afternoon, a rare day when I allowed myself to wander the city without purpose. I passed a small cafe we had once visited together, drawn by a sense of nostalgia. And there, through the glass, I saw her. Emily. She was seated at a corner table, her posture relaxed, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the afternoon sun. But it wasn't her presence that froze me in place, it was the man sitting across from her. He leaned in slightly, his expression animated, his laughter spilling into the air. Daniel. Even though I had only seen pictures of him years ago, I knew instantly. There was no mistaking it. The way she looked at him confirmed everything. An ease, a familiarity, a softness in her expression that she hadn't shown me in months, maybe years. My chest tightened, my breath caught. I stood outside that cafe for what felt like an eternity, watching the two of them share a world I was no longer part of. The betrayal wasn't in the act itself, it was in the realization that she had likely chosen him long before she chose to leave me. The business dinner hall pulsed with quiet conversations and polished laughter, the kind of atmosphere where every detail felt choreographed. Waiters glided between tables, silver trays balanced with precision, while chandeliers cast a golden glow across the room. Yet amid the polished elegance, all I could see was her face, Emily's expression frozen in disbelief. Her calm, practiced mask had shattered the instant she saw him beside me. For weeks, she had lived in the safety of secrecy, believing that her past and present could coexist without colliding. Now, standing just a few feet away, she realized the collision had already happened, and she hadn't been the one to control it. Daniel stood comfortably at my side, unaware of the emotional battlefield his presence ignited. To the others in the room, he was just another guest, a professional acquaintance with an easy smile and a firm handshake. To Emily, he was the man she thought she could hide in plain sight. I watched her carefully, studying every flicker of emotion that crossed her face. Confusion, fear, and something I hadn't expected, shame. For all her composure, for all the careful planning that had gone into our divorce, she hadn't accounted for this moment. Our eyes locked across the room, and for the first time since she had left me, I held the power. Not because I had plotted revenge, not because I had sought to expose her, but because fate had written this encounter with a cruel, ironic hand. I could have approached her then, confronted her with the truths she thought she had concealed. I could have spoken words that cut deeper than any blade, calling out the betrayal that had been hiding behind her peaceful divorce. But I didn't. Instead, I chose silence. Because silence, in that moment, spoke louder than anything I could have said. I let the night unfold as if nothing had happened. I introduced Daniel to colleagues, engaged in conversations, laughed at jokes, all while aware of Emily's restless presence nearby. She lingered at her table, her eyes darting toward us with a mixture of dread and disbelief. Every time I caught her gaze, I saw the storm behind her calm exterior. She wanted to approach, to demand answers, to reassert control of a situation slipping through her fingers. But the setting was wrong, the audience too large. So she sat in silence, forced to watch as I stood beside the man she had once thought was hers alone. By the time the evening ended, her composure was hanging by a thread. I left the event with Daniel, offering him a polite farewell as though nothing unusual had occurred. But inside, I carried the weight of triumph, not the petty triumph of revenge, but the quiet realization that betrayal has a way of circling back. The days that followed brought unexpected changes. Emily reached out, first with small gestures, a text message left unanswered, a missed call at odd hours. When I ignored them, she escalated. Long emails filled with careful wording, asking if we could talk. She claimed she wanted closure, that there were things left unsaid. But I knew better. What she really wanted was clarity, not about us, but about how much I knew. I gave her none. My silence became my shield, my refusal to play into the drama that she had once controlled. And with every unanswered attempt, her calmness unraveled further. It wasn't long before whispers reached me from mutual acquaintances. Emily was unsettled, restless. The man she had left me for was no longer a secret she could keep neatly tucked away. She had been forced to confront the reality that I knew, that I had seen, and that I had chosen not to expose her outright. The ambiguity gnawed at her. And that's when I realized something crucial. Sometimes, the worst punishment isn't exposure, it's uncertainty. Because in uncertainty, the mind creates its own torment. Emily began to see betrayal not just in me, but in Daniel as well. If I could so easily stand beside him without flinching, without confrontation, then what did that say about their bond? Was he truly loyal to her, or was he closer to me than she imagined? Doubt seeped into the cracks of their relationship, the same way it once seeped into ours. I didn't have to lift a finger. Her own choices turned against her, unraveling the world she had tried to build on the ruins of our marriage. Weeks passed, and then came the inevitable encounter. It wasn't planned, at least not by me. We crossed paths at a mutual friend's gathering, a smaller setting where avoidance was impossible. She approached cautiously, her eyes carrying the weight of questions she hadn't dared to ask directly. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, though she tried to mask it with civility. She asked about life, about work, about how I had been. But beneath the surface, I heard the true question she wanted to ask: how much do you know? I gave her nothing. My responses were polite but distant, stripped of warmth. I let her feel the coldness of the space she had created, the distance she had once insisted on when she asked for a peaceful divorce. For the first time, she seemed to regret the calmness with which she had left me. The composure she had worn so proudly was now her prison, forcing her to smile, while her heart screamed for answers. Daniel wasn't at that gathering, but his absence spoke louder than his presence ever could. The whispers had already begun, about tension between them, about arguments fueled by suspicion. What had once seemed like her escape had become her cage. And me? I had found a strange sense of peace, though not the kind she had promised when she left. My peace came from knowing that I no longer carried the weight of betrayal alone. She carried it now, too, heavier with every passing day. The climax of our story wasn't a shouting match, wasn't a public revelation of secrets. It was quieter, subtler, more devastating. It was the realization that betrayal doesn't always end with exposure. It lingers, it corrodes, it consumes from within. And as I stood across from her that evening, watching her smile falter beneath the weight of her own choices, I understood the irony. She had once asked for a peaceful divorce. But what she received instead was a restless conscience, a life haunted by the very man she thought she could keep hidden. The silence between us that night said everything words could not. And in that silence she finally knew. I had seen the truth, I had lived through it, and I had chosen not to destroy her with it. Because sometimes, the cruelest revenge is letting someone live with the consequences of their own betrayal. Life has a way of balancing its scales, though not always in the ways we imagine. After that final encounter, I no longer felt the sharp sting of betrayal. The pain that once consumed me had dulled into something quieter, a kind of acceptance. I realized that my story with Emily had ended long before the papers were signed. What remained was not a marriage lost, but a man who had been forced to face the truth and grow stronger because of it. Emily, on the other hand, could not escape the shadow of her choices. The same silence she once wielded so confidently during our divorce had turned against her. Every unanswered call, every polite but distant response, every quiet refusal to give her clarity, it all built walls around her that she could not tear down. And inside those walls, she was left alone with her doubts. People sometimes think betrayal ends with the act itself, with the cheating, the lies, or the abandonment. But that's not the real ending. Betrayal lingers. It corrodes trust, not just between two people, but within the betrayer's own heart. When someone chooses deceit, they plant a seed of doubt that grows, even in the soil of their new relationships. Emily had chosen Daniel, or perhaps she had chosen the idea of him, the man from her past, the what if she never let go of. But when she saw him beside me, when she realized the past and present were no longer separate, the illusion cracked. What once felt like destiny began to feel like fragility. She had walked away from a husband who loved her, chasing an old flame she believed would bring her peace. Instead, she found herself caught in a web of mistrust, questioning whether she had traded stability for regret. As for me, I discovered that true peace isn't given, it's claimed. It doesn't come from holding on to answers, nor from seeking revenge. It comes from learning to let go, from refusing to let someone else's betrayal define the rest of your story. Months passed, and eventually, the whispers about Emily and Daniel faded into the background noise of life. Some said they drifted apart. Others said they stayed together but never truly found happiness. I didn't care to know the details. Their story was no longer mine to follow. What mattered was the man I had become through it all. Stronger. Clearer. No longer chained to the past, no longer questioning my worth through the lens of someone else's choices. Betrayal had broken me, yes, but it had also rebuilt me. And sometimes, when I think back to that breakfast table where she first asked for a peaceful divorce, I almost smile. Because now I understand, peace doesn't come from walking away without conflict. It comes from surviving the storm and realizing you're still standing when the clouds clear. So if there's one truth I've learned, it's this: betrayal may wound you, but it also reveals you. It shows you who you are when everything you trusted is stripped away. It forces you to find strength in silence, to rise from the ruins with a clearer heart. Emily thought she was walking away toward peace. In the end, I was the one who found it. And maybe that's the final irony of betrayal. The betrayer may win the moment, but the betrayed can win the life that follows. So I'll leave you with this: when trust is shattered, and when the person you love most becomes the source of your deepest wound, what do you do? Do you let it define you, or do you rise from it stronger than before? Because in the end, betrayal doesn't decide your story. You do.